Hello and welcome to another video. Today I bring you an essay on spirituality. When you talk about it, it is often assumed that material and spiritual are contradictory terms. Here I intend to describe another perspective. Material is the basis of spirituality. This isn't something groundbreaking. On the contrary, a lot of people have surely come to this conclusion while thinking about it. Spirituality is very important regardless of whether you consider yourself religious or not. As more knowledgeable people say, transcendence is one of the basic human needs along with food, drink, shelter and procreation. It is usually fulfilled through religion, but it can also be done through other means, like charity work or philosophy. But before I start the topic, it is important to define what is spiritual or spirituality. As average people may see it, spirituality is tendency towards religious reflection and holding certain values above material wealth, values such as faith, family and friendship. Traditionally, in metaphysical terms, spiritual is a way of being radically different from physical or material. Material is changeable and perishable, while spiritual is not. Existence of soul and spiritual beings like ghosts, demons, angels and deities is speculated in metaphysics and religion, all of which are described partially or completely incorporeal or spiritual. Another approach to spirituality is meditative practice of Eastern religions. Meditation can be very useful because it breaks your routine and produces a mental state conducive to philosophic reflection. Thus, it's beneficial even if you don't pursue the concept of enlightenment. All these things are what usually comes to mind when you think about spirituality in religious sense. In a philosophic sense, human spirit can be equated with human mind, so it can be said that being spiritual is to have a tendency towards development of mind, more specifically, a tendency towards comprehension of philosophic concepts. This is what separates it from development of mind through natural science, which is primarily concerned with the study of nature in a materialistic manner. But this is not what this essay is about. It is about connection between spirituality and materialism in terms of money and material wealth. Religious approach to spirituality is very closely related to the former definition of tendency towards philosophic contemplation. Through study of religious texts and teachings, people try to understand their fundamental concepts, thus gaining new perspective and broadening their horizons. This can be positive, but the problem of organized religion is in its monolithic and often dogmatic aspects. Unlike pure philosophic reflection, which presupposes freedom of thought, religion presupposes a set of ideas as an absolute, unquestionable truth, a set of dogmas. This is primarily the case with monotheistic religions like Christianity, Islam and Judaism. To my knowledge, Eastern atheistic religions such as Buddhism and Taoism are more philosophical and open towards free thought. But I could be wrong, because the purpose of religion itself is easily lost in its organized form. It easily degenerates into politics and blind pursuit for power and wealth. Layman believers get caught up in this too. They are distracted by differences between religions instead of reflecting on their own beliefs and making up their own mind on these topics. In conclusion, spirituality as defined in this essay is philosophic contemplation of any kind, or a tendency towards comprehension of philosophic concepts. For example, ethics or attitudes towards self and others. Metaphysics or how do you think the world functions as a system. Epistemology or what are the borders of human knowledge and how do you justify your views as true. Just to name a few classical branches of philosophy. By this definition, it seems that philosophic activity itself is spiritual in a sense, and this is true. As you change your perspective through philosophy, you qualitatively change as a person. Your mentality and worldview change, and that is mental or spiritual development. The common element between philosophy and religion which particularly defines spirituality is the pursuit of purpose and meaning. Without the consideration for purpose and meaning, life will inevitably feel hollow. Whatever you choose to do in life, there are three vital resources to consider: time, energy and money. When the topic of life values gets its turn in a conversation, people will say that money or wealth are not the most important, but things like love, family, friends, religion or similar. This is true, but money is still very important. It is obvious that neither you nor your loved ones can live without material resources, and that your values and religion mean nothing when you are dead. If you don't spend enough time with your loved ones, you will become estranged. It is important to get this out of the way because it is not a part of the topic. And now on to the topic itself. The main product of money is leisure. It is the concept recognized and valued by the philosophers of antiquity. Leisure was not considered just to laze around, but to be free from other important work so that you have time to think. To be able to engage in philosophic activity, first you must ensure you have enough time and energy to do it. If your days are filled with hard labor, you won't have any time or energy left for anything else. You will think and behave as you are taught by others. In other words, you will conform to local tradition and customs because you won't have the time to question them. You won't have the true individuality, but your identity will be the reflection of your group. Therefore, to develop your intellectual or spiritual pursuits, you must ensure your material well-being. Even if you were a hermit and lived in the wilderness, you would have leisure only once you secured water, food, and shelter. Throughout history, philosophers, artists, writers, scientists, and other free thinkers had to rely on themselves or on others to gain enough wealth. If they were of wealthy origin, philosophers already had leisure by birth. They had easy access to education and enough free time for intellectual pursuits. Others who were not so fortunate had to rely on rich patrons like the famous Medici family. Things are not much different in the present. Freelance philosophers work regular jobs, or they are supported by their followers on platforms like YouTube or Patreon. Professionals are funded by the academia and their own work of teaching and selling books. Another important group related to philosophy are priests and monks. They are financed by their religious organization and practice a minimalist lifestyle so they can focus on spiritual development. All of the mentioned groups have to spend time and energy for spiritual pursuits itself. In addition, those who financially support themselves have to spend even more time and energy to achieve leisure. Unless you are born wealthy, it is difficult to find someone to support you. Most people don't have the capacity or interest for work which attracts patrons, so patronage remains outside their scope. Thus it seems best to become a monk if you want a quick access to leisure. But this is wrong. Though they are financed by others, monks still have a lot of wasted time and effort. They have chores in the monastery and they have to perform religious ceremonies which generate profit for their organization and themselves. We can now see that monks are not entirely free for their own development. In fact, depending on their religion of choice, they may have even less free time than people working regular jobs. Their minimalist lifestyle eliminates distractions and allows better focus and more time for spiritual practice. Their profession is spiritually inclined in the first place, which is another advantage of their lifestyle. But they too can pursue philosophic reflection only in their limited free time, which is not much different from freelance philosophers. In conclusion, Christians are right when they say that humans are material and spiritual beings. Maybe not in terms of the existence of soul, because we don't know about it for sure, but in the sense that we need both material things and spiritual development to be fulfilled in life. The concept of leisure demonstrates the materialistic basis needed for spirituality. We can lead a spiritual lifestyle once we secure its materialistic basis. However, it is important not to overestimate the value of money. You don't need to be rich to be spiritual, but you need at least just enough wealth to survive. Material wealth is not a goal, but a means to an end. True goal is leisure, and its purpose is to be free to do what you like. In this case, to pursue spiritual development through philosophy. When you have secured enough wealth to last you a lifetime, every unit of money you earn afterwards is a waste of time and effort. The only exception is if you have a grand plan that requires a lot of money. For example, supporting a charitable goal or an organization. Maybe financing an important project like building a hospital, a library, a school, or other large-scale investment. This should not be done for the sake of money, because you already have enough of it at this point, but because of potential good these things produce. Depending on the type of your investment, it is important to make sure they are profitable and self-sufficient. But instead of personally profiting from them, it would be best to direct your share into the development of the project or for funding similar projects. This is an example of transcendence through selfless acts. It seems the most viable option for most people is that of freelance philosopher, coupled with minimalist lifestyle. It captures the best of both worlds. It reduces the amount of work you have to do to support yourself, while evading wasted time and effort put in religious ceremonies. True spirituality is usually distant from organized religion, so you don't need to be a part of one. Instead, it's the best to independently study pure philosophy and different religious philosophies as objectively as possible. That way you gain inspiration from different worldviews without the restraint of organization. Besides, spirituality is personal. It is exclusively a subjective experience. Organized religion pushes it into common shared experience, which is paradoxical. You can be shown a way towards spirituality, but you have to navigate it on your own. This is it for this video, and thanks for listening.